noticeable, I find, in the Venezuelan discussions is the way they conceive of socialism is designed in a way to not just to win working people to some new idea, but to unify working people around an idea that is already present, inherent in their own experiences and in their own beliefs. You notice that he spends a lot of time talking about the indigenous peoples of Latin America and the leading role they are going to play in the construction of socialism. Because he says they were socialist centuries before the rest of us were around. And they have continued and continue to represent these traditions and believe in them, and they can endow us with this heritage. But then he took up the Bible and started reading quotations out of the Bible, talking about how socialism is found in the Bible. And the early Christians were socialists. He said that socialism in Venezuela was indigenous, it was homegrown, it was Christian, and it was Bolivarian. He went on to say it's so scientific, too. He worked Marx and Engels into it. And the course of the Venezuelan Revolution has been not just to carry out reforms within Venezuela, but to carry out an international policy of unification against imperialism. And so, when the Evo Morales government was elected in Bolivia, the Venezuelans and, of course, the Cubans were quick to offer aid and alliance and partnership, and a whole series of measures have been carried out which have already produced a tangible improvement in the lives of working people in Bolivia. The same thing just happened in Nicaragua with the election of a reform government in Nicaragua that wished to achieve some kind of independence against the United States. It was possible for the Venezuelan compañeros to move in, and in fact it's interesting. You have a dreadful problem in Nicaragua that they do not have electric power. There are terrible power outages all the time, which are devastating. For example, if you're trying to run an economic establishment there, the local capitalists are up in arms. They can't get any help from the United States, of course. The first source of aid they had was from Venezuela and Cuba, which offered to make available to them electric generators in order to get the power situation under control. And so it is finally, after all these years of American domination, they're finally starting to get the country back on its feet. Venezuela also allies with the peoples of the Middle East. Venezuela was outspoken in its defense of the Lebanese and Palestinian peoples during the war last summer. Venezuela has formed an alliance with Iran in an attempt to defend Iran against the danger of U.S. attack, and has been outspoken in the defense of the Iraqi people. So there is the course of the Venezuelan Revolution, a course of an attempt to follow a consistently anti-imperialist course, one of the unity of the oppressed peoples of the world against imperialism, both in terms of their actions for democracy and dignity for working people in Venezuela and also internationally. But as you know, it did not end there. Hugo Chavez has explained that his original conception was that we should find a third way between capitalism and Soviet-style socialism. A society that would be a sort of a humane capitalism in which we would achieve dignity for working people within a capitalist framework. But he says that in the process of attempting to do this in Venezuela, he and the Venezuelan people discovered that this would not work, and that the only alternative in Venezuela and on a world scale is socialism. That is, socialism in the sense that economic activity and production should be organized not for private profit, but for the general good and for human needs. And the Venezuelan leaders say this is not just valid for them. It's a world problem. They see the world as hurtling towards destruction through ecological catastrophe and war. They see this as spearheaded by the disastrous drive of the United States towards war in the Middle East and elsewhere. They see the need for us to take a stand against this, not just through an anti-war movement, which we must, of course, do, but also through a struggle for socialism on a world scale. They call it 21st century socialism. Why 21st century? It's not just a question of dates. Because they're trying to counterpose it to what they view as 20th century socialism, which for them means social democracy, like what we've had in British Columbia with the NDP, which just ends up as being simply more of the same with some slight changes. And on the other hand, what Hugo Chavez at one point called state socialism, that is the system in the Soviet Union in which everything was run by a bureaucracy, in which working people did not have effective rights to control their destiny, and in which privilege was reborn, and eventually the whole system collapsed back into capitalism. Now, I'm not so sure about the dating here, because what they're talking about in terms of 21st century socialism, that is a socialism that is genuinely based on the democracy of working people shaping the functioning of the society at all levels. This is not limited to the 21st century. You can trace it back through Cuba, and you can trace it back through the Soviet Union in the days of Lenin. But we will leave that question for another day, and just note that they have put forward a vision of socialism which is strikingly attractive to working people internationally, that this is going to be qualitatively different from what we have seen go off the tracks in past decades. And they have been specific that in order to do this, you have to transform property relations, that it's not just enough to set up cooperatives, as has been done in Canada, particularly in the prairies, for example. Cooperatives will get reabsorbed back into capitalism if the fundamental economic structure is not changed. It's an attempt to get public ownership of what they call the strategic sectors of the economy. And some initiatives have been taken in that direction through the nationalization, the initiative towards the nationalization of some key industries in Venezuela, including the electricity and telecommunications sectors, and also an attempt to assert popular control over the state bank. Thank you very much.